Okay, everybody, thank you for joining us this afternoon at the next session of our High Street and Town Centres Commission. This session is focusing on planning policy, destination management, and those kind of issues. We were going to have a witness from transport, but we're going to alternate that to the next session instead, just because of the availability of speakers. I'm going to do because it takes too much time, but I can allow people to introduce themselves when they speak and explain who they are and why they're on the call. I haven't had any apologies from members of the most of us are here, although I'm not sure. Oh yeah, there she is. Brilliant, excellent. So without further ado, I think we can hand over to our first speaker, who is we have to do declarations of interest. Charles, I think it's only you if you want to do your normal one.
Just to confirm that I'm a director of Untitled Limited, which is a firm of chartered surveyors who do a lot with commercial property. So just for avoidance of doubt, I'll make that declaration.
And I've noticed Councillor Dixon's put her hand up. Oh.
Just because.
Thanks, Charles. I've noticed Councillor Dixon's put her hand up, and I presume that's because she's on the planning committee.
It is. It is. I thought for the clarity, for purposes of transparency. Excellent. Thanks.
And I'll make that declaration as well, because I'm also a member of planning committee.
Yeah. No problems, Charles. Yeah, if we can note those, that would be great. Okay. I'm the cabinet member for planning, so maybe I should declare that as an interest too. Okay, without further ado, Marketing Cheshire is on the call, and I think that we're to her first to talk about kind of destination management and everything else in Cheshire West. If you got a presentation, Nicola, and then we'll ask some questions. Or yeah. Are you just going to speak to start?
No, I've got some slides. Thank you, Richard. And Beth, shall I share mine? Then I can control the speed of
it.
That would be
right. Brilliant.
Okay. Where are we? There we go. So I've got some slides to go together, which are focused on what we've been doing over the last sort of 6 months in terms of supporting the visitor, retail and hospitality sector. Apologies, I should have said I'm Nicola Seddon, Commercial Director for Marketing Cheshire, and safe to say, alongside colleagues in Cheshire West, it's been an incredibly busy period of time. The word I would use is relentless, non-stop working, and the whole aim for us has been to support the sector, support the businesses, and make sure they have access to the support available to them. So there we go. So one of the things that we did to kind of kick things off in terms of supporting is just make sure that we had that sort of core role as that business support, being that trusted source of advice. So there's over 1,100 tourism and hospitality businesses within Cheshire and Warrington. We've engaged directly with all of them throughout this period of time, and I will be able to tell you exactly how many were in Cheshire West and Chester. I'll follow that on and pass that information to Steph. And we've delivered a programme of subsector forums to just share best practice. So when businesses were unsure about how to reopen, whether they could, what the rules were, we made sure that we got some high profile speakers to come and help them. And I think that really showed us that we do have this central role as the destination management organisation to kind of put businesses in touch with the support that's available to them, help them digest what the rules are around what they can and can't do, and just be that kind of like intermediary between government and the businesses to make sure that their businesses are getting access to all support. And I think, you know, we were able to get some really high profile speakers because of the fact that it was all digital. Nobody had to come up on the train, spend the day in the area. So it's something that will definitely be continuing beyond this period of time. And all of these sort of seminars were available to watch again, and people have done so. And you know, I think throughout one of the sort of I suppose benefits, if you want to say, that of the crisis is that our engagement with businesses is a lot stronger. We have personal relationships with many of the tourism and hospitality businesses in the area now. They do know what our role is, they do feel supported, and I think that will hopefully continue and help going forward. So in terms of reopening, I'm just going to run through today. We did a sort of phased approach in terms of reopening the place, and part that started off with some strong engagement during the lockdown. So this was just about keeping the destination front of mind, and we reached over 1.6 million people during that March to June period. We promoted, if businesses had takeaway services or delivery services, we promoted activities people could do at home, such as karaoke at Story House, or education packs to promote Chester and Cheshire during that period. So it was a really strong period of consumer engagement. Then moving into that June-July period when town centres reopened and some attractions, again we continue to provide that sort of trusted source of information. So explaining to consumers what was open, how they had to experience it, whether they needed to book in advance, and so on. And then moving forward into July and August, we did the further visitor and hospitality reopening, and now working on the sort of focusing on recovery. So just to give you a bit more detail on that reopening retail and outdoor attractions in June and July, I just wanted to show you one of the campaigns that, oh, actually it's not going to work, but we did do a campaign specifically for Cheshire West and Chester, which was about reopening the towns and high streets, and that was really emphasising those messages around safety and social distancing, how to experience the place, so when it was one way on the roads, keep left, such as things like that. And we did a targeted social media campaign that were reaching different audiences that perhaps wouldn't have been exposed to the normal messaging that the council send out. So it was a bit of a complementary campaign on behalf of the council, and it had a really strong result of a reach of 483,000. So hopefully that contributed to the fact that people did start to come back into Chester and Northwich in particular. So then moving into that July-August phase, this was a really important phase because we wanted to make sure we got the messaging right. So it was about acknowledging the situation, focusing on reconnecting with friends and family, because we knew that was the number one thing that people wanted to do, and let people know what to expect when they return, so they had that feeling of safety and reassurance that they needed to pre-book, etc. And then being prepared to change the messaging. And obviously at the moment that's still very real, in that, subject to what happens, we need to oh, I hope they can, Steph, otherwise I'm just talking away. Steph's asking if everyone can see the presentation. Can you let me know? Oh great, you can. And then promoting national initiatives that support the businesses. So we have a role as a DMO, as an intermediary between businesses and Visit Britain. So Visit Britain, we're running programmes such as We're Good to Go, which was a kite mark that businesses could apply for, that showed that they were being as COVID secure as possible. And the campaigns that were run by government, including Enjoy Summer Safely and Eat Out to Help Out, we were that sort of intermediary that pulled together the Cheshire and Warrington, and in particular Cheshire West and Chester promotion for those. And the way we did that was we developed 2 campaigns, one for Cheston specifically and one for Cheshire wide, and I'll just explain why. Prior to coronavirus sort of coming on our radar, Chester, we've been working with Chester on a sort of strategy of something that's a little bit more of a targeted approach towards the city, so trying to bring the destination product together in a way that made sense to visitors, so that encouraging people, if they went to the zoo, oh apologies Sam, I don't know why you can't see the presentation. I'll promise I'll send it to you, or Bethany's got it and can circulate it afterwards. Trying to kind of bring together that destination offer. So if people visited the zoo, they'd come into the city. If people went into the city, they went off into the sort of suburb parts of the city, or the countryside element. And so we set up a new network, which was Destination Chester. Cheshire West and Chester are part of this, along with the zoo, Story House, Cheshire Oak, CH1, Chester Beard, Cathedral, and many of the other businesses represented by groupings such as Taste Cheshire and Chester Attractions. And I think it's probably the first time that Chester's had this coordinated approach with all partners coming together. And the campaign that they wanted to deliver for Chester was SimplePleasuresChester. I really hope you will have seen it over social media during July and August. And essentially it was on the basis that Chester had a really strong offer for people who were looking to get out and about after the lockdown. We've got a feeling of space and openness. It's a walkable city. The green spaces within the place, and it came. What was the foundation was that people in lockdown had a new appreciation for what life's simple pleasures were. So it might have been being sitting in your back garden and hearing the birds tweeting, or exploring parts of the countryside that you didn't know was on your doorstep. So that was our foundation of our campaign, and we were encouraging people to share what their simple pleasures were in Chester over the lockdown, and how their simple pleasures as they came out and started to enjoy the place. So people shared it, and it was a social campaign. These are just examples of the kinds of things that people were sharing. So it was both businesses and consumers who got involved, and all they had to do was share the content and utilise the hashtag. And we got to see some really beautiful visuals of our city through this campaign. It was something that was very much a partnership campaign, and something that we can really build on for the future. As well as that, we created some photography and imagery which promoted the cluster. And again, this is sort of citing to present Chester in a slightly different way, quite a distinctive visual style with a bit of humour, and really sort of bright and energetic. And it was all the different component parts of the Chester cluster. So got the Grosvenor Park for the open air space, Story House, the Rose, so the Heritage Action Zone project is going to be a major part of the Destination Chester network, and will be promoted quite a lot through this activity. Then Chester Zoo, and then independent businesses. So all of those component parts present a really nice image of Chester. Then for Cheshire to support what's happened beyond outside of the city, we developed a campaign that really built on what we'd done in the lockdown, which was using the hashtag #OurCheshire, moving into YourCheshire, as we wanted to welcome people back again. It was aligning with those priorities around visiting friends and relatives and staying nearby, exploring the place with fresh eyes. And they utilised the hashtag again, and it supported the reopening of all the town centre and high streets across Cheshire. So, the towns within Cheshire West and Chester were part of this campaign. These were the campaign pillars that supported it. So, new discoveries, fresh perspectives. So, see somewhere that you rediscover a place that was familiar and see it with fresh eyes. Do more of what you love. So if you liked hanging out in your back garden, we've got quite a few nice gardens in Cheshire, Warrington. More bike rides. So we developed a suite of bike rides from towns such as Northwich to make sure that people got out and about and explored what was on their doorstep. And again, that practical element of know before you go. So you need to buy tickets, you need to book a table. Here's how to avoid the queues and visit safely. And there's just some visuals to show how that campaign was brought to life. And again, ways in which consumers engaged with it. Utilising their own photography. And we, as I've mentioned, that we really supported the national accreditation. So we were really pleased that Cheshire businesses really got on board with the We're Good to Go. And in fact, you know, significantly higher proportion of businesses in Cheshire got accredited compared to Manchester and Liverpool. So the phase we're working in now, and the meeting that I was just in just before this with Steph, was around Christmas in Chester and how we develop a proposition this year. But prior to that, what we're looking to do is evolve the Simple Pleasures campaign and the Your Cheshire campaign into an autumn promotion for Chester and Cheshire. And obviously that's going to promote all the lovely things that you can do in our place in autumn, hinged around a bit of an events and activities calendar. So there's, for example, the Food and Drink Week next week, and Monsoon Forest at Chester Zoo is going to reopen at October half term. Now, obviously, this has got to be very flexible and subject to public health guidelines and so on. But we will be developing the content and trying to support businesses as much as possible. And I think that really underpins what I would say the main role for Marketing Cheshire has been in this period, is being that enabler, that intermediary, that person that can bring, that organisation that can bring partners together and make things happen on behalf of partners. And so that's something that we've really actively engaged and delivered, I believe, and hopefully Steph will advocate for that, and Richard, over this period. Christmas wise, it's again just developing a programme of what is actually happening within the destination this Christmas, and doing it in a way that really supports the businesses, because we need to make sure that we are driving as much business to them as possible. And then this autumn campaign is going to be part of a national campaign. As I mentioned, we are that kind of intermediary. So Visit Britain have developed a campaign for autumn, which launches this weekend, called Escape the Everyday. And we'll be making sure that the Cheshire Western Chester product is promoted through that national campaign. So there's 3 main need states, and we'll be looking to push our content through that national campaign and make sure that our destination benefits from the halo effect of this national campaign and the national promotion that will be happening. And then finally, I just wanted to touch on the tourism sector deal. So this is very much still in the offing. It was obviously on pause for the last few months, but it's been included. Some of the aspects of the tourism sector deal are being updated at the moment and included in the comprehensive spending review put forward, the submission put forward by DCMS. And the main things they want to see coming forward are tourism action zones. And I think we were on a call yesterday with Nigel Huddleston, the MP, who's the Minister for Tourism. He actually came to Chester this summer. I don't know if you were aware of that, but he spent 2 days in Cheshire as a whole, and he had a good tour of the city centre facilitated by Robert Gattonsbury and Steph. And it was a really good to hear that he's really driving forward these tourism action zones. Originally they were talking about having 5, and they want to have more. Marketing Cheshire will be the lead agent, putting forward a submission for Cheshire and Warrington. What that is, we're still working on with all local authority colleagues and businesses, and potentially looking at partnership with North Wales as well. And basically an action zone is a focused area of where we get initiatives which receive quite a significant financial contribution from the government to really drive, address seasonality and drive new visitors into the area. So that's something that we hope that we can achieve a really strong submission. And the main other side of the tourism sector deal that they're really pushing is a domestic marketing campaign on an ongoing basis. So usually they prefer to focus on international marketing. This year, most of the marketing has been domestic, and that will continue. So some increased funding to be devolved down to the likes of Marketing Cheshire to deliver domestic marketing. And then the human resources side, so really changing how tourism and visitor economy is regarded as a job. And I think this really links into the new vision for Cheshire and Warrington LEP, which Marketing Cheshire is now part of, around Cheshire being the Cheshire and Warrington being the healthiest, most sustainable, inclusive and growing economy. Tourism is a great inclusive recruiter, so hopefully that's something that we can see as a benefit for the hospitality sector. So just to finish, because I'll always finish in a way that what you can do to support us and ways that you can get involved. So I'd hope that you as individuals might engage with the destination campaigns and share what you love about our towns and villages and our special places in Cheshire, West and Chester, and encourage any networks that you're involved in to get involved. It'd be great to get some feedback around messages for autumn and winter and your thoughts and concerns around that, to make sure that we can play that through. And we want to make sure that those programmes that Cheshire, West and Chester are leading on, such as the High Street Funding, Heritage Action Zone and the Sustainable Travel Programme, they're all part of what we're promoting this autumn and winter. And then moving forward in our wider role as part of the local enterprise partnership, we will be shaping a place marketing programme for Cheshire and Warrington. So the way that our towns and city are included within that, how we promote Cheshire as a place to live, invest, as well as the role that we currently undertake, which is visit, is going to be really important going forward. So that's going to be a priority, moving forward. So as a very quick run through, I realise I've gone a little bit over time, so hopefully there is some time for questions, given that the next speaker isn't here. Thank you, Richard.
No worries. Thank you, Nicola. That was really, really good. And I was really pleased to be part of the Destination Chester group, and I think the stuff that you've shown shows all of the great partnership working that's happened with all of the different people. But I'll open it. I've got a couple of questions, but I'll open it up to the committee to start with. Anybody got any questions? Councillor Lynn Gibbon, straight with a hand up. Couldn't be quicker.
Yeah, sorry, I was just messing around with it then. It came on, but I do have a question. Do you work with the town centre bids?
Yes, I should say that we do have a very close relationship with the bids. So CH1 Chester bid is part of the Destination Chester cluster, and we work with groundwork on the Northwich and Warrington bid. So from we have a close. We try to do things in partnership. One thing that we've set up through this last 6 months is a town centres grouping that Marketing Cheshire lead and facilitate, and that's all the Cheshire West towns and Cheshire East towns and Warrington coming to that to share best practice, knowledge, look for collaboration opportunities wherever possible. So yeah, Marketing Cheshire is always about partnership, and the bids are a key partner within that.
Do you promote the events like Northwich? Well, prior to the pandemic, had some brilliant events on. Does it go onto your website?
Yes, absolutely. So there's all events across Cheshire and Warrington are promoted via visitchester.com and visitcheshire.com. And in Northwich in particular, we really supported the cultural programme that was being developed. We ran the Cultural Destinations project for that ran for the last 3 years, funding through the Arts Council that Marketing Cheshire applied for and successfully got. And Northwich, a lot of the Northwich events sort of came from that and through that. So we have played an active role in supporting the events in Northwich, definitely.
Thank you.
Thank you for that question and the answer. Councillor Firefield, you were the next person with your hand up.
Thank you. Let's lower my hand before I forget. I thought that's very fascinating. I was just quite kind of interested is whether or not Marketing Cheshire has got sort of more information about, because what I was sort of thinking about is the whole point of Marketing Cheshire is there to promote Cheshire as obviously for tourism and other bits like that. And to me, there's sort of two vital elements of that. There's a sort of an external tourism, i.e. people coming into Cheshire, and then there's the internal tourism of people from Cheshire, staycationing where we are. And I'm quite curious as to whether or not we have feedback from visitors, be they from outside or inside Cheshire, as to what they like, and why they, you know, might go to Chester or might go to wherever, and also, you know, more generally, what do tourists look for when they're going for a destination, as to whether or not we can look at what we're providing and see where either we're getting it right or we've got a gap in the market. Because I sort of see that there's elements of it that you might have your 5 key, the most popular tourist locations in Cheshire. Presumably Chester Zoo is the most popular one, and then after that, who knows? Is it Chester as a city centre? You know, is it, you know, those sort of things. I'm just curious as to what appeals to people about Cheshire, A, Cheshire, and then B, tourism generally.
So every year we do a report on, which is called STEAM, which is the volume and value figures for the destination. So with that, we assess how many visitors have gone to each of the different attractions, see how they're changing on a year-on-year basis. And a lot of the time it's about this constant innovation. So if you look at what Chester Zoo have done over the last few years, it's constantly developing its product. Other places such as Cholmondeley Castle now building Bewilderwood, these places are innovating and developing. So we utilise that information to sort of play back what visitors are interested in and looking at, also trends in accommodation. And we just try to, personally, I'm involved in a tourism society and tourism management institute, and through those forums we do get a lot of information on general consumer trends and visitor trends. Visit Britain do a huge report every year on perceptions and consumer trends that we can use to support any business that's looking to develop and evolve its product. So we get approached quite often. So I've just been approached, for example, by Blakemere, who want to develop some glamping lodges, and they'll come to us to get that perceptions and research information that we get from different sources to help them shape their developments. So I'm not sure if that answered your question, but we can definitely, all the research that's available to us is utilised in how we shape and develop our marketing campaigns and approaches. In terms of what's the residents versus visitors, one key stat for that is the most visitors to our consumer facing website, visitcheshire.com, is a predominantly local audience. That's the starting point. People use it to find things to do, events and so on. And then especially during the lockdown, we saw a huge increase in local residents utilising our information. So I do believe we do have that role to inform the local residents and attract visitors, both.
Yeah, I think one of the things I'm quite intrigued about is it's almost like local infrastructure, because I thought probably what works for Cheshire is that because we're at the crossroads of the M6 and the M56, we're midway between Liverpool, Manchester, Stoke and North Wales, and I think part of the fact that we're there and that there is the access to good infrastructure is quite useful. But also I suppose it's what the local infrastructure can be, where you go to certain areas and what the car parking is like, what the bus links are like, what the the footpaths and the cycling, that sort of thing.
Yeah, one thing that we're thinking about doing for next year is creating a kind of what you can see in our towns and Chester in 15 minutes by foot, by bike, by car, because we do have an agglomeration of experiences, and that is something that we try to play out a lot. So for example, I think Chester's got some fantastic off-road family cycling, but it's not something that comes through enough in what we do. So we're trying to kind of like bring all those different components together through this, what you see in 15 minutes by foot, by bike, by car, because from our towns and cities, and really create them as hubs for local areas. So hopefully that's something that council can support and be involved in over the next year.
Thank you, Nicola. Yeah, I was just thinking. I was just thinking about when we were doing the Destination Chester stuff, and there was we were talking about the zoo, and Jamie was saying, oh, you know, we want Chester to be the attack brand, and it must be really hard for Marketing Cheshire to try to manage the expectations of all of the rural. I went to Manly Mere for the first time the other day, and that's a good innovator, you know, a place that's just kind of opened up and become this centre for paddleboarding, and we really went. That's the first time I've ever been there, but it must be really hard for it to have to manage all of those pressures when you've got a city like Chester saying, well, we want to be the kind of place where everybody wants to come, and then you've got all of these other areas that are also on to you, asking you who want to be the same thing.
I actually got some feedback on that this year, which is something that we have grappled with over many years, how we balance the Chester and Cheshire aspect. And I think actually separating out Chester and dealing with it in this distinct way, and then looking at the broader Cheshire offer, has really helped that. And it's not to say that we don't cross promote between Chester and Cheshire, but Cheshire businesses have felt that, in a way, conversely, by doing that they've got a more of a focused approach to Cheshire, because it's not Chester dominating the Chester and Cheshire message. It's Chester is this Destination Chester cluster, and Cheshire is this broader offer. So you're totally right. And I mean, there's around Delamere, there's some new fantastic businesses. So that new lake that's developed, there's the forest lodges that are going to open. So I think by doing that, separating out the Chester grouping, it gives us sort of free rein to promote Cheshire more effectively as well.
Really good. Sam Dixon, Councillor Dixon, you've got your hand up.
Thanks, Rich. Nicola and I have worked together for a very long time.
Sam, it's nice to see you again.
I'm really pleased that Marketing Cheshire has gone into the umbrella under the LEP, because I think it was a struggle at times to get the LEP to understand the importance of place marketing as an economy. So that's really encouraging, and the work that you're doing is really good. But you do more than that. You don't just promote us as a destination. You promote us as a place to live and to work and to play. And I think, for example, the Ports the Place campaign that you ran, was it last year or the year before, which was about, you know, promoting all the new housing schemes that were coming into Ellesmere Port, were really important. And I just wondered if you've got more, given that we're going to come on to a presentation from Rob Charnley about planning, I wondered if there's sort of more in the pipeline around, you know, sort of people coming to live in Cheshire and Chester, because we have got a very big development going on outside Chester. There are other schemes coming forward. It's a great place to work. It's a great place for your kids to come and grow up. And, you know, I think that sort of marketing, which is in essence inward investment, because people are considering bringing their lives here, is just as important as sort of day trippers and people who are already here. So have you got more of that planned?
Definitely. So this is again, like you say, Marketing Cheshire being part of the LEP has given us that platform to take that side of the work on. And that at the moment through the LEP, we're working on the development of a place marketing strategy and approach. And it's very difficult, because Cheshire and Warrington is not this homogenous place. So it's a place of places, and we want to really celebrate the distinctive local places within that Cheshire and Warrington area. So the development of that strategy won't be, this is the new brand for Cheshire and Warrington. It'll be about, how do we promote Ellesmere Port more effectively? How do we promote Congleton? So, for example, and it hinges off these two sort of growth corridors. So the science corridor to the north, and then the HS2 corridor, which I know for Cheshire West is just a bit of it, but all of the towns and villages within Cheshire West need to be part of that place marketing approach, because say for example Bolesworth Estate, I was talking to them about the fact that they have this business park on their patch, which has some really innovative companies, life science companies, breeding companies. They've got the Cheshire Farm Ice Cream, one of the most visited attraction in the country, and they've got housing development ideas and plans. That is like a microcosm of what Cheshire West and Chester has to offer, that business investment opportunity, these great places to live, and the visitor offer. So this is something I definitely think will roll out more over the next year. We're redeveloping the LEP website to create more of a hub for promoting Cheshire as a place to invest, live, and meet and study, all of those aspects. And I guess one of the other great things that's come as a result of Marketing Cheshire moving in to the LEP is the LEP starting to recognise the role of tourism in creating that quality of place. So that we all know that people want to live in places where there's nice places where there's good things to do, and tourists coming to our attractions, sustain them for use by residents. So yeah, it's going to be a really good year, I think, working on that, Sam, and hopefully you can be involved as it rolls out.
And last question, are you turning that Nicky Thompson picture into a Christmas card?
We did last year. We sold them at the Christmas market.
Oh, was it?
So yes, yeah, he's got a really distinctive style. Yeah, I know you like it. Yeah, it's but the Christmas market's probably going to be a little bit different this year if it goes ahead. So we're just working that out at the moment, aren't we, Steph? So
thanks.
Okay.
Good stuff. There's no other hands up, but I just had a bit of a question, really. So the commission last week, we discussed what our final report is going to be like, and we were toying with the idea, or proposing the idea of creating some kind of framework based on all of the Place Management Institute kind of thinking that's around at the moment, something that's kind of takes all of the best practice and helps town centre groups set a plan of action that they can collectively roll out together, and that people understand what their role might be in that. So if there are empty shops, who's responsible for finding out who the landlord is, who's going to go away and do it? If we want to make public realm improvements and try different things, who's going to go and do that? If we're going to try and create events that drive footfall, who's going to go away and do that? And that's obviously going to be about partnership working, and the work that you've done with Destination Chester is probably a good example of where that's been quite successful quite quickly. Can you foresee, I mean, I'm hoping you say yes, but can you foresee a role for Marketing Cheshire in being involved in these groups to try and find sources of funding for marketing campaigns for different areas to try and help us boost footfall in our town centres and reimagine what they might be in the future? Yeah,
I hope so. And it's interesting that because Marketing Cheshire is a DMO, which is officially a destination marketing company, but actually what we like to see ourselves more as a destination management company. So it's about how we shape the place and how we're involved in developing the products. And we'd love to get more involved in more of the agendas around developing the place and the product, creating, ensuring our high streets are vibrant, have a great mix of product and businesses. Because it's in our interest. I mean, that was the whole reason why we created the Christmas market sort of 6 years ago, that in its current format, because we felt like we needed to do stuff that helped create the, make the place have a buzz and have more activity going on. We've been involved in the discussions with the bid around, a proactive approach to attracting independents into the empty shops and so on. So I hope that, yes, is the quick answer, and the long answer is I do believe we have a broader role beyond marketing in that kind of place shaping and management side of things.
Brilliant, excellent. Okay, thank you very much. If there aren't any other questions, then I think we will. You're welcome to stay, Nicola, if you wish to hear the next presentation, or if you've got other things to do, then no problems. But thank you very much for coming to be part of this and for giving us your thoughts today. It's really, really helpful. So thank you.
On the basis that Robert stayed through my presentation, I'm going to stay and
given
listen.
the courtesy of sitting through yours. When we finish I know you know Steph, so when we finish the report, if you've got a chance to read over it before it gets published and give us any thoughts through Steph Ramsden, that would be really helpful as well. Your expertise would be welcome. Okay, Mr. Charnley. Thank you, Nicola. Mr. Charnley, come on down. The price is right. There.
I apologise. It seems like half my IT is working on the laptop. Hello?
Yeah, you might have to do it without your video on, Rob. We're struggling to hear where I am.
Can you hear
me? Rob, I can't.
Can you hear me at least? Is that?
We can hear you slightly better than.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you better than if your camera is on. So if you leave your camera off, that's probably a good thing.
Right. Wait me a second. Is that coming through for everybody?
Yeah. Yes, it is. Yeah, it is.
Hello?
It's just whether or not we'll be able to hear you, but far away.
Yeah, sorry, yeah. Everybody can hear me and see that.
I think so. I can.
Just about.
Yeah, just about.
Sam Naylor, I'm not hearing any sound.
Is everyone still there?
Yes.
I'm still here. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think if
Can
you
you
got.
hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, Rob. Beth,
Yeah.
Beth, have you got a copy of Rob's presentation?
No, I don't. But Rob, if you could send it to me, I could share it on the screen.
Circulate, yeah, or you,
Yeah,
that would be great. And then Rob, you just keep your camera off and talk to it, and Beth, you can move them on. That would be fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah, I've switched to tethering off the mobile phone, which hopefully will be a bit more stable. I'm not sure why today all of a sudden it's having issues.
Yeah, we can hear you actually perfectly fine now.
Yeah, okay. I think now I'm tethering it should be okay, but I'll just send Steph a copy. I'll just send them. Sorry,
Councillor Gibbons having a bit of a problem there. Wait a sec.
Sorry, Beth, does that come through?
No, I haven't had anything yet.
Right, we've lost Councillor Gibbon. Oh, she says she making attendee change. Right, Lynn, are you there? Are you back? Lynn? Lynn Gibbon, request to join. We've lost Sam Naylor.
I'm okay. I'm
Oh, you're here. Oh, great.
I'm looking at you, Richard.
Ah,
I'm
oh,
back. Yes.
sorry to do that. Yeah, Lynn, you're there. Brilliant. Okay. Excellent.
Sorry, Beth, does that come through?
I think we will.
Yeah, I'm just opening it now.
Yeah,
Brilliant. Okay. Back in business. Okay. Perfect. Fire away, Rob.
Yeah, so obviously we can just jump straight to the next slide. Obviously, I think just pick up. I think you were asked to look at a few things in particular. So obviously, what I'm trying to cover today is obviously recent changes to the planning system, and the impacts, challenges, and opportunities that's created in our high streets and town centres. Asked about any kind of emerging trends and implications that have already become apparent. How we understand those trends and changes can be monitored through the planning system, and then very briefly touching on the kind of changes to the entire English planning system that are currently out for consultation at the minute. So if I were to jump onto the next slide. I'm not sure, obviously, I know there are some members of the planning committee on here beware about how we've kind of had a permitted rights explosion in the last 5 years, it seems. As every year goes on, there seems to be more and more changes and they get faster and more rapid. And it's clear a lot of this has been there to kind of deal with some of the changes out there that planning can't keep up with, because it does take a long time to go through the local plan process. So, you know, we've seen greater flexibility to deliver homes in various locations, to deliver retail, the ability to move flexibly between uses. Just to give you an idea, though, it's not really impacted on Cheshire West and Chester in a huge way. I mean, just picking up at some of the kind of processes, you know, you can change offices to residential, you can change a retail unit to residential by going through what's called the prior approval process. So it's a permitted development process where there's very few things we can look at. But, you know, whereas this has been taken up, you know, it's primarily a London thing. Offices to residential here, we've only had 38 applications. And obviously out of them, only 24 have been approved, with the rest either refused or withdrawn. So although the changes have been introduced to deal with some national level issues, they haven't really hit us in quite the same way. But if we can move on to the next slide. Thank you. I mean, the big one here is the changes that were announced on the 20th of July and have just taken effect from the 1st of September 2020. Now, what this does, for those of you familiar with planning in a bit more detail, is kind of all the different uses were split into kind of what's called use classes. So use class A focused on kind of town centre uses. We had retail designated as use class A1, banks and building societies were A2, restaurants and cafes were A3. We had offices fell within that kind of use B class. So what's happened with the new legislation is they kind of deleted all those classes and we're kind of starting at class E for whatever reason. But that's now badged as commercial, business and service. So it basically means all those uses I've listed there, so retail, restaurant, office, financial professional services, indoor sport, medical and nursery uses all now sit within the same use class. Now what this means in planning terms is you can change between any of those uses without requiring planning permission, purely on the basis of a change of use. It's not even considered development. So when we're looking at planning permissions, we're looking at development, which can either be building work, engineering operations and changes of use. So by creating this class, what they're saying is you can move and shift between any of those uses without requiring any planning permission. It is not even development that requires going through the formal process. You'll see obviously two other classifications have been set. They're not massive for the town centre. Obviously there's still the ability to move between kind of residential education uses, museums, art galleries, you know, fairly non-controversial changes there. And there's also been an extra kind of local community use, which is to do with community uses, which now includes a small shop as well to try and afford them some protection, but also to allow them to be set up fairly easily. If we're right to jump onto the next slide, please. So again, as I've highlighted, it's again none of these changes within use classes are going to be development. And again, what's clear is none of this is kind of spatial. So it's not limited to one location. So it basically means this will apply to both our town centres and high street city centres, but also all out of town uses. So, I mean, this has the potential to reduce, as I said there, is non-office type activities, including retail, to out-of-centre business parks. And the kind of on Wrexham Road, the Chester Business Park there is no reason why those uses couldn't shift within, now that office falls within that category, to retail or those other uses there. If Cheshire Oak should run into any of the problems, it has the ability to, again, be as flexible as our high streets in terms of meeting those kind of changes. And again, the issue with this is it's, ever since I started in planning, the policies have always been dead set on protecting economic uses like offices, and retail is kind of the primary use in town centres. Obviously, that undermines a lot of that to the point, and obviously the arguments on various sides about how we need to find kind of new uses within our kind of town and city centres to keep them alive. But this has kind of outstripped some of those policy considerations. If we're right to move on to the next slide, please. There are some kind of good things you could say that come out of this. Things like pubs, drinking establishments, takeaways, live music venues. They've all been pushed into a use class which is called sui generis. So basically that they're uses that don't fit easily within any other kind of use classes. What it means is you can't move from that use to another use or apply for a new one of these without needing planning permission. So we're always going to need planning permission to consider those and the impacts of those uses. So again, some people might argue we need greater flexibility, but at least these uses have the potential for some kind of antisocial impacts, or the need to maybe put conditions in place that will control the impacts of those uses. I think when we reviewed our local plan policies against those kind of permitted development changes, fundamentally it undermines 8 of our policies in part 1 and 6 in part 2, because they are all focused around protecting retail uses, employment uses. They're very much kind of controlling and pushing forward those uses in those centres, and again restricting those sort of developments in unsustainable locations, which we are going to lose as by virtue of these changes. If we're right to move on to the next slide, please. So again, obviously the kind of some caution to this is we have seen a limited kind of take up of some of these permitted development changes in the past. I think the issue with this is it's much more far reaching, and there isn't even a process they have to go through. Obviously, traditionally, we've always seen a huge focus on the conversion of rural buildings to dwellings, given the type of borough we are, given those assets are out there. That's where we've always seen the biggest take of permitted development rights. This isn't even permitted development. This is fundamentally saying that these changes aren't development at all. And it's really early days to see how, what kind of impacts they'll have. Obviously, it's going to help to address potentially vacant units in the centre. If there's a more flexible range of uses they can access. I guess it's this issue with some of those vacant units. Was it planning that was holding those units being taken up back? I guess we'll have to see whether people take up, offices in some of these vacant units or other such uses. But it's clear it signals a massive shift away from protecting retail as the kind of primary use within city centres and office accommodation and some of those kind of locations. If we're right to move on, please. Monitoring is going to be difficult. I mean, we monitor vacancy rates and we look at changing uses as part of the local plan work to see if our policies are working. Obviously, we rely on the submission of applications to do that, to keep on abreast of those changes. The issue with the changes not requiring any application is there will be nothing in planning to monitor it. And obviously, we're going to have to work closer with colleagues in regeneration, the bid, people who monitor the kind of shifting, changing shopping units in those relevant centres to keep on top of that. So we are going to have to think about how we monitor that in a different way. There will still be the requirement for some things to come through us. So residential conversions in the city centre, there will always be at least some paperwork that will allow us to kind of keep on top on how that ebbs and flows within the city centre. If right to go on to the next slide. And the big one really is kind of a lot to cover on this one, and obviously there's a lot of work ongoing, looking at how the planning for the future white paper affects the high street, and obviously that'll be one of our considerations. But I mean, this is huge. This is looking at fundamentally changing how the English planning system works. And there's a member briefing in the week just to kind of get people engaged with that. I mean, fundamentally, it's looking at kind of badging areas for growth, renewal, and protection. And you will do a lot of the heavy lifting that you would see with a planning application through the local plan process. So you will at local plan stage define what sort of developments you want where. It's about giving developers certainty about what they can and can't do in a location. So we could see a lot more flexibility for our town centres. again, it's just a consultation, so there's a lot of information missing from it. What the kind of the meat on the bones for it, essentially. You know, we have conservation areas. Would they be badged as protected areas? If we wanted to see renewal areas where we have conservation areas, would there be a conflict there? Does the government set some of those areas, or are we fully in control of how we define them? I mean, that's some stuff that we'll have to see and what will come out of the consultation. I think the key benefit for me through the kind of the stuff that's been forward to white paper is this focus on design and placemaking. So if we are able to say, right, within the whole of Ellesmere Port, within the whole of Chester, within Winsford, this is the sort of development we want to see, we can then start getting stuck into things like design and placemaking. So rather than having to deal with it on a site-by-site basis and having kind of overarching strategic policies, we will be able to potentially have much more detailed policies about design and how we want things to look and what is generally appropriate for those areas. So we could kind of see a much more, hopefully, joined up development. And it is right to now start to put the focus more on the back of design and placemaking. So that's sorry, it's all the slides, just kind of a whistle-stop tour and kind of a bit rushed, I'm afraid. But again, if there's any questions off the back of that or anything else we want to discuss.
Brilliant, thank you. Thank you, Rob. So, has any members of the committee got any questions? I have. Let's start with Councillor Dixon first.
Where do you start, really? So the first thing, yeah, at the beginning. Well, I mean, I was interested in your comments about conservation areas, Rob, because the entire Chester city centre is a conservation area. So if that's a protected area, what would that mean in terms of these potential changes of use? I also wondered what the impact of neighbourhood plans would be for the future as well. If you could answer that, thanks.
Yeah, they are still looking to maintain neighbour plans. We're just not entirely sure what form they will take. So that does form part of the consultation. They're not looking to remove neighbourhood plans, but you will, again, at a national level, will set a lot of the development management policies. So if a lot of the policies we have in our part 2 that are quite detailed policies, they would then actually be set nationally. And the part of the planning for the future stuff is about making planning a lot more digital and engaging local communities in a lot more in a bigger way. And sorry. So some of that will hopefully we'll be able to engage with local communities using a much more digital kind of planning system. But it's going to be about getting in there earlier in the process, and it's kind of getting the message. If the white paper goes through in its current format, it's going to be saying to local communities, you need to get involved in the local plan stage and really get involved, because it's not going to be planning applications that kind of drive form and function potentially. You know, it is going to be very much defined by those local plans. But again, it's a consultation, so it's the devil will be in the detail when it comes out, really.
So, Rob, do they articulate how frequently they expect local plans to be renewed? Because essentially, people will only have that one bite at the cherry. So if they've got a field at the back of their house, then they've got one go every 5 years to say, don't build on it.
Yeah, it's a much quicker process. So what they're saying is we have 30 months effectively to turn around one of these new style local plans, if that's the way the system would go through. And then there would be more chance for review, because the idea is to make it to speed up planning effectively, is the way they are badging it from that point of view. So you would be looking to do things on a much kind of quicker turnaround. And again, they're hoping by making things more digitally, it's going to be able to do that quicker effectively. But again, it's just a high-level consultation document at this stage.
I mean, a lot of the planning work is done digitally now, and people complain all the time that they weren't aware that things were coming up. So, yeah.
It's more moving away from your things on the side of lampposts, your small adverts in papers that, you know, in this day and age, that's not really how people engage with things. So the kind of one of the best things that comes out of the consultation for me is looking at everyone's on their smartphone. How do we do that? Everyone is using social media and other outlets. And it's always been a bugbear for me, is how do planning get involved with that? Because historically we're paying out a lot of money for, again, press adverts, printing notices and things like that. And it's been convinced that people are actually paying much attention to them.
I think this is a really interesting conversation. It's probably beyond the scope of the commission, but you know, I don't even know if I've ever seen a planning notice properly in a paper. I've never gone looking for one. It's a really good point. You know, you do see the things on the lampposts, but yeah, it's a really interesting point. Right, okay, we've got a couple of other councillors with their hands up. Sam, have you still got your hands up? Sam Dixon, I don't know whether you wanted to put it down. I'll go to, I didn't realise what the order was, so I'll just go to Charles next because he's the next person on my screen.
Thank you. I mean, all I would say that certainly from my professional background, this is seen as a good thing, which won't probably surprise you all. But there are occasions where the difficulties of getting planning do get in the way, especially in relation to letting commercial property. Now, I'm just sending you all it's a list that Allsops, who the auctioneers have produced in relation to effectively the use classes order, which is I think might be beneficial because it lists them all and it shows what the until the 1st of September how they were listed and then how they're going to be listed from now on. But I do think that actually such a radical change in the use classes is quite a good thing. I'm conscious that one of the most, you know, the sort of things like pubs and restaurants and things like that, those are still within their own separate use classes, and that's often where the most contentious element is. And I think it's generally a good thing that town and city centres are going to need to be more flexible. We've seen in the commission that was a meeting or two ago, where often there was discussion that, you know, we need to have a wider range of uses within the town centre. And I think we need to be flexible in terms of what's there, as long as it's a general commercial use. I think in relation to the wider planning paper, if we are moving to a zoned way of doing planning, again, I think that's actually quite a positive thing. My experience as a ward councillor with planning issues is that most of the time that actually what people are complaining about is the way something is being developed rather than the principle of it being developed. And I think that sort of zoning and building control is a good way of doing things. I mean, there's going to be lots of caveats, but I personally, from a professional point of view, welcome this. But I'm conscious that obviously it's going to cause a lot of disruption within the council of having to work out how to acclimatise to it. So I'm not quite too sure if that's answering a question, other than potentially how do we think, I suppose, how we can adjust for that as a council in relation to a brave new world of where things are going to be much more flexible in terms of what people want to do. There we go.
Yeah, and I absolutely do not disagree with you in terms of it's kind of this idea that we can't, because the local plan process can take so long, time moves ahead. And I think the only thing the government can then look to do is look at these legislation changes to kind of expand it. The only issue we see is sometimes the unintended consequences. I mean, if we look at the office to residential one, when that was first released, they didn't have any requirement for natural daylight. Because unfortunately, they thought, I assume, whether you're thinking everyone will be good, decent and good human beings when kind of making these conversions, but we ended up with some, not in our area, but you end up with some truly shocking conversions that didn't have any natural daylight because it wasn't planned for. Now they have changed legislation to introduce that. It's hard to think about every potential unintended consequence that could come off the back of some of these changes. But again, I guess, you know, the idea is you want an adaptive system that you can then change. If those issues crop up, then there is the opportunity to address that. But again, for me, it's knowing the details of these changes, and once we get a bit more information about how you label those areas and what you're able to do with them, then we will comment on the kind of high level stuff at this stage. But the details will be interesting.
Brilliant, thank you. Thanks, Rob and Charles. Councillor Gibbon, I'll go to you next, and then Sam Naylor.
Thanks, Richard. Hi, Rob. This is a question a few meetings ago, we looked at the categories and we asked if it was possible to have a list of the types of categories in each of our key areas, like one for Northwich, one for Chester, one for Winsford. Did that ever materialise?
It's been circulated, Lynn.
Yeah,
it's circulated that. I don't know if you've seen it.
It's on the bottom of the dashboard.
It's on the what? Sorry.
On the bottom of the dashboard.
What, in today's papers?
No, last time's papers.
Oh, right. Well, I've missed that then. Okay. Thanks very much. That was what I wanted to ask, because if these things change, I wanted to see, you know, what the difference was. Like Rob gave those details at the beginning, like 38 had gone, you know, to 25 and what have you. So we need to keep an eye on that and how it changes because of the impact on the town centres. But in the main, having looked at this document, I think the flexibility is just what we need coming through this pandemic and with Brexit on its way. So, yeah, I'm broadly positive of it. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's just interesting that, like I say, if you look at the office to residential conversion, I think some of us have looked at some of those office buildings, particularly in Chester, and thought, well, they'd be right. Oh, yeah, well, we are surprised that we haven't seen more people step in and convert them to residential. But it just hasn't happened. It hasn't materialised. So again, it's just waiting to see as it broadens and as it flexes, who actually takes up that offer really, moving forward.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Lou. Councillor Naylor.
Yeah, hi Rob. I agree with Sam Dixon. It's, you know, where do you start? And it looks all very complicated to me. And I couldn't see your slides, by the way. My screen wasn't working, but I think I have been sent a copy, so I'll look at them later. It's like an example this week that I've handed over to Andrew Cooper because he's a bit more streetwise on planning than I am. But it's a shop with a residential flat above it. She says she's getting nowhere with planning because she wants to change that from residential to, I think it's an acupuncture shop. So is that, could she just get on with that under the new kind of regulations?
Potentially not. Acupuncture will be one of those weird and wonderful ones that we'll have to look and decide whether it fits into a kind of healthy beauty use. Is it a medical use? Is it? That's unfortunately one of those more complicated ones, which probably means one of our officers have to do a bit of digging to look if there's any case law or any other previous examples. So, you know, because it's things like, you imagine, it's not really comparable, but a tattoo shop is a sui generis use. It's not retail. It's not. It doesn't fit into those uses. But weirdly, hairdressers has always been retail.
Right.
So they're not, you know, it's planning can be a dark art at times. It's kind of knowing where that is. But yeah, unfortunately, if you want to email me details, I can look into it. But the reason is probably because it's not one of the more straightforward uses we have to deal with. Yeah.
And then on a more general note, everyone's saying that the future for town centres is this kind of repurposing of town centres. Is that going to be a kind of fast-moving situation? I mean, have you got any examples of where it's taking place yet?
No, well, with this legislation, the really flexible stuff came up on the. It's only been in since the 1st of September. Right. I think we'll just have to see how it takes off. Like I say again, it's this idea that was planning really holding back the town centre.
Yeah.
It's just no, you know, because a lot of these changes you could still apply for them. You would just need to get planning permission, or you would need to go through the process. What people would generally come up against is our policies that would say, well, no, actually, in the heart of these town and city centres, we want to keep retail because that's the way it's always been in terms of protecting those uses. But you know, personally, I just don't think that's, you know, we need to be a lot more flexible moving forward to survive, really.
Yeah. So do you think these changes are going to speed things up? Because, I mean, Paul Friston's been doing his best, but I kid you not, trying to get these statues into Northwich of Brunner and Mond, I'm just banging my head against a brick wall. I mean, will it speed things up?
The idea, so again, one of the potential positives of the new system is the idea that everyone gets certainty before they even think about putting in a development. So you've kind of already badged an area for a certain type of development. You've given them some sort of development parameters. The issue for members is that they will have to have a think about as members is there's that loss of control. A lot of that could be set at as a national level through the system and having less of a say on some of the kind of principal issues, and it will be more focused on design or kind of the colour of the bricks, you know, the kind of the more detailed the detailed work, but we'll have to see. But these permitted development changes really speed things up because it just takes out the need for planning. You're kind of able to make those changes without needing to come through as effectively. And that's not to say there isn't other legislation that would pick things up if needs be. There are health and safety legislation, there are environment protection legislation. There's still rules and regulations that cover the highway, all the rest of it. So
yeah, okay, thanks for that.
Thanks, Rob. I've just got Councillor Dixon. I think she's got a hand up again for another question, and then I'll ask mine.
It's not really a question, it's an observation, because I've represented the city centre for 10 years, and what I've seen during the changeover away from sort of planning consent to permitted development for office conversions is the proliferation of Airbnbs, which has been a nightmare for local residents. And more of this happening without any oversight for them is just going to cause a furore. There are people living in our towns and city centres who I would suggest the flexibility will not be for them. They will not have any recourse at all, apart from whenever we discuss the local plan. So I foresee real problems. I mean, I have to scrutinise all of the planning applications that come forward for my ward, which is now 18,000 people, and really carefully look for what's going on. And the only sort of of protecting existing residents from permitted development changes is through the environmental protections that Rob has outlined, and you have to be really eagle-eyed. So your flexibility for my local residents will be a nightmare, a free-for-all that they will have no say over. So I just had to say that, because it's not some glorious new dawn. It really is going to be problematic for people living in city and town centres.
I think the other thing it's worth highlighting is when let's say we've got a brand new building and they want to build a brand new building and they say it's going to be retail, we are going to have to think when we get that building in, what's all the other uses it can be put to. So it's never going to be as straightforward now as to consider, right, someone's coming in for a retail building, because once we've approved that building for retail, it can shift and change between any of those uses. We'll then get stuck into well, actually, maybe we want to control some of those uses. We might add condition that says you can't shift and change to one of those other uses because we're not happy with the impacts. And then there's going to be a raft of appeals when people decide to add those conditions or even refuse them on that basis. I think it's, yes, new legislation can make things simpler, but in my experience, it generally makes things more complex, particularly until things kind of settle down a bit in terms of how we approach them. And new legislation is always rife for legal challenge, effectively.
Right, thanks for that, Rob. Just thinking about some of these things. We're here as a commission to try and figure out what we can do locally, and there are obviously things that are within our control and things that are outside of our control. And you might have heard, Rob, what I was saying to Nicola before about this idea that we're going to try and build a framework, and it may well be that the framework that we build and the committees that might form out of it, or the town centre groups that might form out of it, even if those groups already exist, but they decide to adopt this framework that we're creating, they're obviously going to have ideas about what the future of their town is going to be. And although we can't, although we through planning, if people put in an application, we have to process that application, and we can't turn it down just because a committee of people that have got no kind of sovereign power of any description say that they want to reduce the size of retail in a town space, and they want, that's in their head, that's the way forward for the town, and then have other uses on the outside. We can't, just because they've decided that, we obviously can't just do that for them. However, through planning. However, do you see that there is a role for planning officers? I know we've spoken about this before. This greater linkage, greater role for planning officers here who have done professional qualifications in planning, but have ended up spending a lot of time processing applications rather than working with regeneration teams and working with local communities to actually design and establish what those town centres look for. Is that something that we could come forward as a recommendation, a greater linkage and a greater involvement in planning in creating beautiful places?
Yeah, I think placemaking is being positioned as that's what we need to get back to, and that definitely seems to be the way of kind of that everyone agrees that's where we need to get back to. We've obviously got the commission because of Building Back Beautiful, Building Back Better. The white paper highlights it. It's got to go back to placemaking. I mean, what I was saying to the way we get ahead of this is I think local, residents in town centres, people need to think about what do they want them to look like. If we were to have some sort of design guide for Winton, Chester, Ellesmere Port, what would that look like? I mean, I had a discussion with a developer this week who came to me and said, Rob, I've got this like amazing scheme. It's exemplar. It's built, it's the highest possible kind of design you could see. And I said to him, well, that's what all architects say to us. What I want you to tell me is why is that locally appropriate to Chester? No architect is going to tell me to say he's bringing forward a fairly moderate design or it's not that great. We've got away from that kind of, and again, they're using images from places in Bristol, Bath, London, images that just come from anywhere. And me going back to them to say, but again, why is that locally appropriate to Chester? And I think we have lost our way because it's hard in terms of to say we can't pastiche the historic buildings, we can't replicate them now, or we go, it's that age-old thing of design being subjective and the modern butting up against the historic, or is there a way that we can reflect the historic buildings through form, through materials? We're just going to have to get a lot better at that. But
so I think this committee, these groups could play a role in that, and equally planning could support these groups to understand this new legislation and understand what is within their powers, so that when they set about making these plans, and these aren't intended to be, what does a place going to look like in 10 years? It's about what we can do right now. And you look at the trends that you provided that Lynn alluded to before about the change of uses in the dashboard. They are different in the different towns. That it's more restaurants and takeaways in Chester, it's more estate agents and banks and cafes and restaurants in Ellesmere Port, etc. And Northwich with more drinking establishments. So planning has this ability to be able to see, it holds this knowledge through its daily activities in how places are changing, and it's how we link up the other parts of the council and communities to either latch on to a trend or to potentially try to stop a trend if we think it's going to create an oversupply of something that will ultimately become a downer on the town or the high street or whatever it is that we're talking about. And I suppose the framework that I want to see come out of this is something that allows people to be able to have the right connections with different people inside the council, different organisations, to be able to have those conversations and collectively make things better very, very rapidly.
Yeah, it's getting people talking about what do you like about your area and what's missing. Particularly with all the impacts of COVID, people will have very rapidly found out, stuck to a very small geography, what they're missing in their local area. And hopefully everything will be there in our towns and city centres, but there may be some things we want to focus on. But yeah, in my mind, it's getting back to the local stuff. People will badge all these policies and things that will be set at a national level, but I think we need to take a step back and look at locally what's working and what isn't really.
Completely agree. Okay, we will. Sam Dixon's she's coming in for a last minute point.
I'm really sorry to prolong it, but we do have that. It's called. We do have that. It's called the One City Plan, and we have local policies in Part 2. I mean, in the time since I've been a councillor, I remember it going from that we have a policy to protect retail in the core of the city centre, and clearly that's just not going to happen anymore. So we've already got it, and a lot of local areas have got that sort of vision. We've got a public realm design guide, which sort of sets out what's in our ownership, if you like, in terms of the highways, what that should look like. But I just foresee that, developers always claim that planners are barriers to development. They say it's too difficult to develop anything in the city centre. And if we start to prescribe to them what their buildings should look like, they'll just say, no, I'm just gonna appeal if you're too prescriptive.
This is again where it comes to the devil being the detail. Until we know what kind of controls we will have through any new system, or even if that new system will be brought over wholesale. And you're right, it's basically taking all that work that has been done and using that as kind of a basis for the kind of whatever new plan it is. But again, I guess reflecting on the COVID stuff in terms of there have been lessons learned, and maybe people will want to review some of that work that's been, well, we are reviewing that work that's been done in the light of where we are at the minute, really.
Great. Okay. So involvement of destination management organisations and involvement of planners in whatever are recommendations that come out of this, I suppose, is the bit that I've picked up on today. Is there any members of the committee that have got any other points that are clearer than that? Those two things. I mean, I know there's more detail in that, but that's certainly what I've picked up on. No hands raised. Okay, I think we can probably finish early. There isn't an agenda item for any other business. But before that, Charles is going to say something. But before that, I just wanted to say thank you to the officers for arranging the speakers, and for Rob and Nicola for joining us today. Charles?
It was just a briefing, as we've got just a little bit of time at the end. I was just sort of wondering, in terms of how the commission is going forward, is that next in a fortnight is effectively the last meeting. So I'm just sort of thinking in relation to how much stuff is going to come back to that, in terms of what discussion that we're going to go and have, and therefore whether or not it might make sense for for whatever paperwork there is to arrive a bit beforehand, and what we're thinking of in terms of the draft structure and report that we're going to be looking at.
Good question, Steph. Have you? I don't want to put you on the spot, but have you got any thoughts about when we'll receive a draft version, or Caroline?
Yeah, so Caroline, myself and Beth have got a couple of hours in this week and a couple of hours in next week to go through how we're going to start to add all of the valuable information in. I think we did circulate a draft structure to the group a couple of weeks back, and I think everybody supported that was a good approach. I think we'll aim as far as possible to get it out before the meeting. So I think if we can update you early next week, I think I don't want to overpromise and underdeliver, if that makes sense. Okay, that's fine. And if if we need to be flexible on that final date or whatever, a bye-week or whatever, then so be it, to give us enough time. I'm just thinking about the committee, what Charles has said, being able to digest all of that information, that it might be that we just move it to the following week or whatever, to give you time and for us time to read what you've written, if you know what I mean. I think if we could take a view at the end of this week, when we've had our first session, then we'll know what we're dealing with, really. Councillor Dixon's got a hand up. She's already mentioned to me it's her birthday, so I'm sure she'll be supporting. Given the speed at which things are moving, I think, and particularly the announcement yesterday from government, I think you're going to have a lot to digest, and I think we need to get this right. So rather than set it to a prescribed timetable that is just arbitrary because we've set it, it needs to be. We need to have all of the facts in front of us, and when we're presenting it presumably to cabinet, then this needs to be as full a report as it can be. So I would say, you need to take your time, not too much time, but you need to be as inclusive and as comprehensive as possible. One of the other things I've been quite heartened by is the amount of people who've written in, with evidence from across the borough, and it's been quite interesting to see that a lot of the things that we've discussed have been reflected in the views of residents. So I do think that we're, we are chiming. I think the things that we've been discussing are chiming with what people who are interested in this kind of thing that live in our borough are interested in too. But I think there's a lot of information in there that also some good nuggets that need to be pulled out and put into this as well. So I do think taking our time over the final bit is not necessarily a good thing, but just circulating it in enough time, as Charles said, for us all to be able to digest and think about it, I'm definitely in support of. Okay, great. Has anybody got any other business? Should we wrap it up there, and we'll communicate by email about whether or not we need to change the date at a later point? No.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks,
everyone.
Rich.
Thank you.
All right, take care, everyone.
Thank
See
you.
you soon.
Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye.
Thank you.